to pass them off to others. So Lam Rim, as I think Brian mentioned, means steps on the path. And I just want to take a moment to orient to that, because the title is quite key. So path, we'll start with path. So path implies that there's some kind of opening, there's some kind of journey that you're on. It's not steps in the same place, steps against a wall, right? So that we, each of us, individually have a pathway, our life itself, our consciousness, our mind. We have outer pathways and we have inner pathways that we move on. Steps implies that there'll be what? Yeah, some kind of movement, some kind of progression, right? So this is important to really consider. So often when we think about taking steps, we think about a sort of outward, I started here and then I got over to the table, right? And while that may feel like the experience of going through the Lam Rim in terms of the transformation, the title implies that there will be transformation of some kind, right? The path itself, the steps that you're taking are internal. So we already have the pathway inside us, and in a way, we're not going anywhere, but we are taking steps to be where we actually are. You just materialized. Hi. Now, there's an unspoken part of the title, which I think is meaningful that it's unspoken because it's sort of unfathomable, right? So it's Lam Rim, steps on the path, and then unspoken is to enlightenment, right? Or to awakening, or to realization, or to freedom. There are all types of ways that we could sort of put that. But we can acknowledge that it's steps on a path to something that is unknown to us, but that we have some intuition for, we have some sense of, that our life has some motion, we feel presence, we feel that there is maybe, we don't know, maybe there's some reason we're here, maybe there's not. It's a part of the Lam Rim. These are questions that we encounter in the Lam Rim. What am I here to do? Why did I show up in the first place, right? And very important to ask those questions, and we're going to look at some of those today. But the unknown aspect in particular is key for our consideration today. The underside, the shadow side of things, that which is not in the light. Hey, come on in, have a seat. So I'd like to go in and start with a meditation that just opens some space so that we can have a sense. We can't actually move along any path unless there's space, right? If there's no space to move on, there's no path. A path occurs when there's opening. And this is the foundation of our practice, some sense of opening. How do we connect with some sense of openness? So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. And we'll just do a mini demonstration right now. So in front of me, there's space, right? Can we all agree on that? I can do this, right? Because there's an opening here, okay? So I'm going to ask you, can you please focus on this opening? Don't focus on me, but just try to tune into the space. And now hold your awareness there in this space in front of me. Okay? So something can pass through this space. Don't follow it. That's a thought. Something can pass through this space. You don't need to follow it. Just stay with the space. That's a feeling. Things will pass through, events, roles, ideas, exciting ideas, boring ideas, thoughts about what to do later, thoughts about what you did before, all these things passing through. Stay with the space, just the space. Yeah? Okay, relax. So maybe you can sense how challenging it is not to, right? Not to go off. The space is always there. There's no thought, there's no feeling, there's no body, there's no idea, there's no concept without space. So although it might seem like there's space here and then I pass something through it, and those are two separate things, we can't actually identify the space without all of these other things around it, right? For most of us, I would posit, and you have to check in with your own experience and your own mind, always. But for most of us, most of the time, we are emphasizing what is moving through. And we're following what is moving through. So we catch on to the thought, or we catch on to the feeling, or we go, oh, what am I going to eat later? And, right? So what I'm going to ask as an experiment is that we sit for 10 or so minutes, about 10 minutes, and just shift the emphasis. You can do this with your eyes open if you wish, although I'll offer that that might be more complex because there's so much stimulus. Or obviously you can do it with your eyes closed. If you do it with your eyes closed, then you need to tune in to what the sense of space is in your own being. Where is your awareness resting in? The awareness is actually one of these things. Even to say I'm aware is one of these. There's a space that we're resting in. Can you experiment with shifting the emphasis of your consciousness, of your sense of your life, being in the space? Whatever passes through is fine. Don't worry about it. Just let it go. And if you go off on it, if you find, as I often do, like I've planned a whole retreat next year, you know, in the middle of my emphasizing on the space, right? Then you just notice that. Go, okay, relax, let that go, and practice coming back and just emphasizing, re-emphasizing. It's like tuning your camera, right? So if you find that you've gone into your habit of tuning this way, just shift the focus and go, okay, just dial it back to the space, yeah? Everybody clear? Any questions? Okay, so get a seat that's comfy for yourself. Very difficult to emphasize on the space if you don't feel relatively comfortable in your body. And this goes for all phenomena that are coming, sounds, inner, so outer things, outer sounds, outer feelings, or if you, of course, if you have eyes open, outer stimulus, smell, taste, and any internal feelings, thoughts, images, etc. No need to control them. They are fine, no problem. Just stay on the emphasis of the space. So here we go for 10 minutes together. Staying with what you're doing. Take at least a minute to make the transition. And as you do, see if you can experiment with maintaining the awareness of the spaciousness as you shift the emphasis slightly to include the ability to follow my voice, to feel your body, maybe to take in the shapes and other people in the room. And then just taking a minute or two, you might make a note for yourself. If anything came up, or maybe noting what your strategy was. I trust that you'll know what it is that you might want to mark down. So that was interesting, huh? There's space everywhere. Everywhere, always, there's spaciousness. It so rarely feels like that as we go through our lives often. You know, I'm sure you've experienced this. We go walking a lot, and you know, sometimes you go walking and there are those burrs that like get caught on everything, you know, and you get home and it's like there's burrs all over you. And often our minds are habitualized like that. They're habitualized like little burrs. So as your mind goes wandering, it just catches on everything and just gets taken away, you know? So you were in a field and then all of a sudden you're in someone's kitchen. How did you get there, you know? Or all of a sudden you're in a memory, or all of a sudden you're somewhere else. And our mind has millions of those little burrs and they get caught on everything. They go everywhere, right? So is it possible for us to practice, to consider, to experiment with a different shape of the mind that doesn't get caught on everything all the time? Why would we want to do that? Would we want to do that, you know? We're just experimenting. So I also offer, it's important as you do these considerations to note what self is doing them, and if the self that comes up that goes, okay, there's a right way to do this. I'm going to get this freaking space. I'm going to stay in this space. You know, like that thing comes up. And is that spacious? Right? Is there spaciousness in that self? And maybe that self does need to come up, maybe, to start to engage it, right? Maybe a self that's like, all right, space. I'm gonna stay here, you know, no matter what. But I think it's fascinating to watch how we approach these things. So often we're given practices, you know, you come to a space like this and I'm talking and there are things I offer and you try them, we try them together, and for you to see what is the feeling that comes with these. They're all just experiments to encounter ourselves. It's not like any of these meditations or practices, they're not meant to do something for you. They're not meant to produce some result. We can mistake that and think like, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna get this result from this thing. They're not offered like that. And actually my sense of it is that that's not a very compassionate mind, like, you know, okay, you need to do this and get this thing out of it. You know, the meditation's like just sitting there, like, I'm here, you know, and you engage it, and through the engagement, you see something about yourself. You have the opportunity to see something about yourself, right? But sometimes we miss that because we're not actually looking at what's happening, we're looking at what we're trying to get out of the meditation. So we miss the real fruit of it, which is the relationship, the quality of the relationship that comes up. That's the fascinating space, right? That's the real step on the path. So our path, our development, our spiritual insight, anything in our life begins with some kind of space. And from that space, we get some sense of direction. So in the traditional teaching, the first preliminary or the first element that comes from the space is some sense of guidance. And that guidance could be external in the form of a person, place, thing of some sort. That guidance could be internal, right? Where something arises, some vision arises of where you want to go to, where you want to move to, okay? If you have aligned with a guide that is really useful for you, the energy that will come from that guide is one of, my life is good. You know, my life has some meaning to it. Just say it that way. Like, I have some reason to be here. And if the energy is not that, you might want to try to tune into a different guide. So these are the two in the Lam Rim. These are the two what we call preliminaries. You must have some kind of guidance. traditionally, we focus on an external guide at this point, because oftentimes we don't really know how to touch base with a real useful inner guide. But sometimes people do, you know. And then secondly is the teaching that you will get from that guide, the direction that you will get from that guide, which is not so much like, think about this, do this. It's a sensation, it's a feeling in your life, like, I feel grateful that I'm here. There's some reason for me to be here after all, right? With those two things, with a sense of vision, sense of your path, sense of where you're going, and the feeling like, I want to go there, you could say it that simply. The guide comes, you go, oh, yes, there's a place to go, and I would like to go there. Right? That's all. Then we can start to enter the first stage of our spiritual evolution. And this is what this fall is all about, these parts. So in the first stage of the spiritual evolution, or the evolution of one's being, we're marked by certain things. And in the traditional meditation, which we're actually not going to do today, we usually do, but we're not going to do it today. We'll pick it up next time. We go into a castle, right? And this castle is representative of our inner self, our inner spirit. And when we get to the foundational evolution stage, we're in one room of the castle. And there are 4 things that happen in that room of the castle to us, 4 transformations that we go through. Okay? The motivation at this stage of one's evolution is very simple and very sane, okay? And you could say it this way. The motivation is to come into more direct contact with your reality, with yourself, and to try to engage yourself to improve your life somehow. So it's a desire to say, I want to see myself more clearly, and I want to have more agency to direct my life in a way that I would like. Okay? Traditionally, we would say that the motivation of this person is trying to get a better rebirth. Right? So at this stage of their spiritual evolution, they're going, I want to either stay at least in the space I'm in, but hopefully go higher, go deeper than I am now. Okay? And rebirth meaning perhaps this body dies and I go to a next body, but rebirth like you wake up tomorrow. Who are you? How is the way you're living your life today affecting who you're going to be tomorrow, 2 years from now, 20 years from now, if you live that long, right? And on and on. The Barry Taylor, who's a Christian minister who was speaking here last Friday, I got so much from his time, the time that he shared with us. And he was explaining how the start of his spiritual practice was when he said to himself, I'd like to be a better person. No one else said it to him. Maybe other people had been saying it to him. You know, you should be a better person, right? But something flowered inside him where he said, could I be a better person, right? And it was very beautiful because one of the teachers here, Lama Lauren, she asked him, she said, well, where did that come from? Why would you want to be a better person, right? And he so simply answered, because I was an asshole. That's a huge realization on one's development of your consciousness. To actually take yourself in, and this is coming from yourself, of course, right? I mean, someone could tell you you're an asshole all day long, and you could be like, well, I'm sorry you feel like that. I'm awesome. I mean, who knows, right? So he had this feeling inside, I'm not comfortable with who I am. I would like to be a different person. That is this foundational stage of one's development, is that feeling like I'm really taking interest in my own possibility as a human being. I'm taking a deep interest in what is possible for myself. And along with that, you have to actually look at yourself quite directly, which frankly, most of the time is not so pleasant. And you know, there's some idea, I think, some fantasy just energetically that often comes up, and maybe it has come up for you, but maybe not, You know, you come to a center like this, or you go to church, or, you know, whatever it is, you read a self-help book, you go to therapy, whatever it is. And there's some feeling like, I'm going to get away from myself. I'm somehow going to go to some other, you know, some heaven. I'm going to go to some place. I'm going to go to Mahasukha. I'm going to some other place other than myself. And unfortunately, we're all still here, or fortunately, right? You're still there. So really important that we all recognize that as we come to classes like this, as we're inspired to move along paths like this, that we're really talking about looking at ourselves quite directly. And that is a profound and truly compassionate moment in your life when you start to really do that and to continue along that time. So to recognize, you know, maybe your recognition is not, I'm an asshole, you know, but maybe your recognition is a question. Is there something else? Or just, you know, how do I want to be with myself? How do I want to be with other people? Or if you know how you want to be, you sense clearly how you want to be, how do I do that? How do I go forward? You know, like, you know, Saint Paul says, I do all these, I have what I want to do, how I want to be in the world. This is not a direct translation, okay? But this is what he's basically saying. I have what I want to do, I have what I want to be, I know the actions that I want to enact, and I watch myself all day long not do those things. Why do I do that? Where is that coming from, right? This is this foundational level. These are these questions, okay? So there's a motivation, the motivation to move somewhere, to improve yourself. And then there's some things that happen on this stage as a result of that. One is that you give up being a victim. You give up being victimized by other people. You take responsibility for yourself and your actions, your thoughts, the experiences in your life, okay? So as I said, there are 4 things. We're going to focus on one today, right? But we did one last class, which had to do with death. So there's a recognition that you're going to die. At least a consideration of that. That's the first sense. Okay, I'm a mortal being. And this is wisdom. This is the foundational level of wisdom. I am not a permanent thing. And yet I feel like I am. Why is that? Right? This little like thing should be turning. Okay, I know I'm going to die. I don't actually know when. And yet I feel like I'm going to make it to the end of the sentence. Something's off there. I mean, that you can just spend 60 years right there, just going like, huh? What would it be like if I was more aligned with the truth? You know, to check in with yourself, to go, is it true that I don't know when I'm going to die? Is that true? And if that's true, you know, and you have to go through all the mind's like, well, you know, you have your vitamins, you're vegetarian, you know, and it's like you have to go through all the stuff, all the machinations that your mind does to try to prove that somehow you have a set lifespan, right? And then maybe you have the great grace, although perhaps sorrow, to have someone in your life just disappear or like get hit by a car, right? And you go, oh, wait a minute. They were vegetarian too. What's that about, right? So when you've come to a clear realization in yourself that you really don't know when it's going to be, then you can start to attend to this strange sensation. Of course, the sensation will have already shifted by that point, but you can start to attend to that sense that's like, so why do I feel like I know? Where is that coming from? Is that an illusion? Am I in reality there? Okay. So we talked about that a bit in the last class, right? So recognition of death. And then asking oneself, so if I am indeed going to die, you come to that clear recognition. If I am going to die, what happens? Then what? Right? Am I certain that I know what's going to happen afterwards? Right? This is where we're looking today. What happens after that space? Okay? And then the other two considerations that we'll go through this fall. Do my actions matter? Given the fact that I'm going to die, does what I do make any difference at all? Is there cause and effect in this world, right? And then if my actions do matter, how do I want to be? Where is my stability in this life, right? If my life can be pulled out at any instant, where is my ground? Is there any ground? Right? That experiment that we just did with the spaciousness, that's a wonderful one for that. What would it be like if you took spaciousness as your ground, rather than your feelings or your thoughts or your relationships, all these things that are zooming through, that are passing and changing? What if spaciousness was ground, which is no ground at all, right? What would that be like? So this is the realm we're in at this stage, these steps on the Lam Rim, okay? And this has to do, as we go through these considerations, as you go through these considerations, realizations in your life, you will find that there will be a profound reorganization of your energy and your priorities, where you're putting your energy and what the priorities are in your life. If you have a deep recognition of your mortality and a deep recognition that you truly don't know when you're going to die, I guarantee you will shift the priorities in your life. Moment to moment, not just like, what am I going to do 20 years from now, but just moment to moment, what is my priority? I may never see Leanne again. What's my priority in that moment with her, right? How do I want to be? So today we're going to look at this space after the death. And the traditional teaching, which I'm actually not going to do today, I'm going to fold into the next class. We're going to go a little off-road today, but it's directly related. But the traditional teaching is a consideration of the possibilities of what might happen after you die. And in particular, at this stage, a consideration of the possibilities that you probably wouldn't want to engage, okay? Other realms. So this is also something to just consider. Is there some realm other than this realm? You know, do we have access to those spaces? Are they just fantasy? You know, to really think about these things. So there are 3 realms in particular that you look at. Again, I'm just mentioning them now to sort of orient you. There's the animal realm. We can see the animal realm. Then there's a realm called the craving spirits realm. This realm is a realm that is overwhelmed with unquenching desire. And then there is the hell realm, with a whole variety of very intricately described hells. My teacher, he said he used to go down to Long Beach to this very famous teacher down there to receive the Lam Rim. And he said and this guy would go through the Lam Rim sort of the way we're doing here over several years, okay? Every weekend he'd sort of do a teaching. And he would go down, he said when he went down, they were on the hell realms. And he said it was like 6 months on the hell realms, you know? He'd go down to hear this guy talking. It's like now we're going to talk about this cold, you know, hell. And now we're going to talk about this hot hell where your body burns. And they're very intricate. They're very rich in their imagery. But the short of it is that these are realms marked by profound discomfort. So our realm is also marked by discomfort. I mean, chances are if you check in with yourself at any given moment there, you could find some kind of discomfort. We're very good at doing that. You know, even if you're like, no, I was feeling fine. And I said, well, Kelly, is there anything that's discomforting? You know, your mind's like, yeah, no, there is. Yeah, I've got a little itch here, you know. And it could be quite small, but it's still, there's always some feeling of like this, right? Like something's gotta shift. Partially what we're seeking or considering as we go through practices like this is to wonder, could I lessen that discomfort, right? So if I'm this uncomfortable in my life at the moment, is it possible I could get more uncomfortable? Is really what the considerations of these other realms are. How uncomfortable could I possibly get? And where would that be coming from, okay? So the most uncomfortable are the hell realms, marked by, you know, unbelievable pain and agony. And then you get this crazy desire in the craving spirit realm. And then the animal realm, they say, is marked by the sense of discomfort that comes from dullness and fear. you know, and even the most sedate animal, our dog is profoundly sedate, wonderfully sedate. You know, he's got like the best possible life as of an animal, I think. He's got a good life in this realm, right? And you can still see how quickly he becomes afraid, right? So we can just consider what are our possibilities of discomfort, and could we go there after, you know, or could our mind shift in a moment and be there, you know, next week, tomorrow, and where might those be coming from? So we'll really go into that next class. But today I want to talk about a slightly different aspect of this space after one passes, after your current sense of self, the other possibilities, the unknown. And this is the realm of the underworld, the shadow side. So this sense of discomfort, you know, partially what we're doing in this life most of the time, if we really look at it, is we're figuring out how to avoid our discomfort. Can you guys jam with that? You know what I'm saying? Okay. So here's what I'd like you to consider for a minute and do a little writing on. I'm just going to ask you a question. What are your ways to avoid looking directly at yourself? What are your ways that you avoid being with whatever discomfort is coming up? And just, it can be one thing, it could be a whole list. We'll just give a couple minutes and see what comes out. So feel free to keep writing if things are coming up for you. So it seemed like everyone had a pretty easy time going to that list. And was there anyone that was like, I don't know? So that's interesting, right? And I find quite comforting, actually. So we know, maybe we don't know all of the things we do to avoid really being with ourselves quite directly, being with what is actually occurring, the ways we sort of wriggle out of our reality. But chances are we know at least some of the primary ones, right? So now maybe we don't know what would happen if we stopped. And that's something to think about. Sometimes I think, well, if you call up for yourself, pick one thing on your list and just sort of say to yourself, okay, if I stop doing that, and just see what feeling is there. Right? And so this is not something that we'll, just maybe come to today. But the consideration of, is it more worth it to you to know yourself or to be with yourself more directly than doing this thing? And why would that be? That's sort of a core spiritual question, because these habits we certainly won't shift if we're convinced that wriggling away is worth it more than a direct moment of seeing ourselves, of being with ourselves. Okay? So you might think to yourself, well, why would I want to stop? What is my intention? If you look at your list, my first thing was make a plan. Okay, I'll just make a plan, right? So seems like that works for me a lot of the time. Why would I want to stop making a plan, right? And then you can sense, well, could I experiment with that? Could I try it? In controlled, as I always say to my students, in controlled situations, like in a situation where it's not going to feel like life or death to you, could you experiment with catching it, catching the wriggling out, and saying, wait a minute, why are we going away? What's here? So we're going to take a break, and then when we come back, I'm going to tell you a story. And the story is about coming into a very stark meeting with all of the things that one avoids. The underworlds, all of the stuff that's been neglected, all of the stuff that's been ignored, all of the stuff that's been repressed, and a pathway through that space. So that's what we'll do when we come back. And usually we take our first break in silence, but we're actually going to reverse it today. So we'll come back at 2:30, and we can be open to speak during this break. But I would say, as I always say, to think for yourself how you want to use this time in a way that furthers your intention for being here. So even now in this controlled circumstance, 13 minutes to check in with these very things we've just been writing down and sort of talking about. How are they working? Stay aware for yourself. And if you catch yourself wriggling out, no judgment, but just maybe notice it or see, what if I did something else, right? If you always go straight to the food table, maybe you just sit for a minute before you go or something, I'm going straight for the food table, so that's just for me to get some space to go to the food table. All right, so let's take a break till 2:30, please.